year without the staffing, we're not gonna be that high.
Okay. This number is
No, yeah.
vastly higher.
I believe we have everybody that we're expecting, and
Yes.
we do have a quorum by one, so we're good. So if the board's ready, I'll call the meeting to order and then we'll move from there. You ready, Mr. Stanley?
Okay.
I'd like to call the SAU 44 Joint School Board meeting to order, March 21st, 2022 at 6:33. The first order is to nominate a joint board chair. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to nominate Jennifer Fry as one of the co-chairs of the joint board.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
It's fine.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Okay. And I'll hand it over to you.
All right, and so the board had discussed, actually, I shouldn't say the board, Sue and I discussed if it made sense to continue with the co-chair setup. The joint board is only going to exist for another few months. And we agreed that continuing with the co-chair setup made a whole lot of sense. Sue's not here today, so I'm not sure what you all on the Nottingham board were thinking in terms of a co-chair or whatnot. For the
Well,
joint
I
board,
think
so.
it's a great idea.
Mhm.
You know, I don't want to nominate Sue when she's not here.
I'll nominate her when she's not here.
All right.
She's been doing it. I don't think she would object to being nominated, but
If she does, she can quit in
she
July.
can quit.
There you go.
I'll second that nomination.
All right, so we have a motion from Carol and a second from Kathy Brosnan. Any discussion? All of those in favor? So that is unanimous as well. We are going to have Sue join me as co-chair for the joint board for the remaining time that we have a joint board. So thank you all. We should back up and start with roll call just so that everyone knows who's here. So I'll start with Nottingham. Sue is not here tonight. Kathy Brosnan,
Yes, here.
Carol Martin.
Here.
Megan Sabasco.
Here.
And Lori Kilberth is not here tonight. For Northwood, Todd Abernathy.
Here.
Melissa Sauls. Here. Chrissy Berry. Not here. Brian Winslow.
I'm here.
And I'm Jen Fry. All right. So next on our agenda is public comments. We don't have any public here to comment. Would any of the board members like to address the board? I just want to take a moment to welcome the Nottingham board. Didn't have any turnover with our most recent elections, but in Northwood we did. So I want to welcome Melissa Sauls and Todd Abernathy to the Northwood School Board, and in default, the joint school board as well. So thank you. All right, next we have our joint board reorganization. We've done our co-chair elections, and now we need to move on to committee assignments. So if you look on page 1 of your packet, we have those items. All right, so co-chair Jen and Sue, our secretary remains Alice Trito, our assistant treasurer remains Mary Bolger. Kathy, you've held the role of treasurer in the past, haven't you?
Yes,
Would you be interested in continuing that?
sure.
I'd like to make a motion for Kathy Brosnan to be our joint board treasurer.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Thank you. All right, all those in favor? Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you.
All right. So it looks like we've changed these up a little bit. Nate, I see a cross out for curriculum advisory committee.
Yeah, you could most likely cross out professional development representative. I didn't want to do that for you,
Mhm.
but I think that's one that you could cross out because we're not going to be doing a joint professional development this year.
Right.
You know, we usually plan for
Borrow your pen.
the other year, so I think you could remove that one as well.
All right, that makes sense. All right.
The-
I was brand new. I was Melissa and Todd last year. It's committee assignments. So if you want to talk us through those, that would be super helpful.
So your, no problem, your evaluation committee representative. So with this, we've already had those all established. The only person that the board evaluates is me, and then I would share evaluations with the board moving forward for formal nominations, but those would be done at the separate level. So again, it's one of those that if the board really wants to keep together, you can, but it would not be a required committee for this level since it's separating.
Okay. Thoughts about that? Anyone feeling strongly that we should continue?
I think so. No.
All right, we will take away our evaluation committee representative, SLC representative.
So this is one that I would still recommend that the joint board has someone, maybe even see if you could have two, because both boards will have the need for this moving forward. You'll both be a representative district. So it would be nice to have one from each board. They are done in the morning, as it says, so your next one won't be till May. They do a gathering and usually there's a breakfast. So
Did they have the December meeting?
they did not because it was remote.
Mhm.
I wouldn't mind being a rep for that.
Anyone
I
interested
most
in
likely
that?
can't do that after tomorrow. Yeah.
I can,
Can you do an 8:30 meeting twice a year?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as I have it on my calendar. in advance.
We'll have Kathy and Melissa.
So the superintendent evaluation, you would probably still want one from each board at this point. I believe it's pretty laid out, though. It is your board chair. So whoever your board chair is would be a part of that. And this would be the final year, and it'd be just my evaluation at the end of the year.
So for Northwood, we haven't reorganized yet, so I'm not sure who our board chair will be. But from Nottingham, you had
It's Sue.
Sue, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So number 5, your management committee. This, I think you would still want, it's less of a management committee and more of a transition as we start moving forward. The two boards are really going to need to start determining how to do some of the splits that are left. With 2 boards and multiple materials, you're gonna have to start looking around and say, what is it that each board is gonna want to take with them, how that's gonna work out, things of that nature. So you've already built that into your committee structure when you report out on transitions. But this is one of those that you're probably going to want to do that same kind of thing. You know, it is a management committee, but it is also really looking at the separation of where to go for the next 3 months. I think it would be important to have that.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if that management committee tries to work out the separation agreement so that we're not having to do that.
That's,
Yeah.
That's a large
yes.
group.
Yes.
I guess for our, I would be willing to volunteer for that just to take some of it off of Sue's plate, because Sue and I have been on the transition committee.
Great. And I'm happy to take it for Northwood unless
I'm happy
someone
to
else
give it to you
feels.
if you want it.
You're very
I'm
generous,
happy to
aren't
handle
you?
that. All right, so that's the SAU Management Committee will be Carol and Jen. Technology Committee.
I don't think it's necessary at this point because I think that will be embedded in the
in the
transition.
transition,
Yeah, because we're not going to be developing any new SAU websites. It's going to be really at the local level. So I think that's a little bit redundant.
Right, right. And we're also going to need to be splitting up some of those, computers and dealing with the servers and all that sort of
Yes,
stuff.
that's
So that
correct.
fits in with the separation committee.
Yeah.
All right.
So then that leaves you with the all ed committee. At this point, with that separating again, I don't think it's necessary. We really didn't meet much over the last couple of years once it was established and put together. It is something that, I think there was a little bit of confusion here, and I'll just go back to where it says plan and develop programs for students. Really, we're the ones who will plan and we'll just present it to you. And I think that can just be done at that SAU level here. I don't think it needs a committee. So, especially not with the separation coming up so much.
Great.
The SAU audit committee, that one I'm not 100% sure of what that will look like. like with the separation, because normally it's going on all of next year as well.
Mm,
So I don't know, I don't have a recommendation on if you need to or don't, because that's, as my finance is not my background, I think it would be nice to look at it as a potential for the next 3 months to see what it's gonna look like. I just don't know how that works out into the end, because there's still audit issues coming up.
Maybe if it's part of the separation agreement, we could include potential representation until the audit closes or something on that.
I think that'd be perfect.
mhm.
Okay, so.
But I think Sue did that previously, right?
Yes.
In the SAU Management Committee, that seems to be a duplicate of number
Yes.
5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Thank you for your help with that. Thanks, everyone,
No
for volunteering.
I also had sent down the BCA. I know it went out to everybody. So, oh, it's already back.
There you
Wow,
go.
that was quick.
Yes, so policy BCA, the code of ethics for board members, was passed around. Everyone who is in attendance signed off on that. And now we wanted to talk about policy DFA investment.
Yes, so, part of the items that you need to look at on a regular basis is you need to reaffirm multiple of your policies each year to stay within audit compliance. This is one of those that needs to be reaffirmed to make sure that we're following through on everything that we're doing. You have local investment policies at the district, but you also need to have one at the SAU for the fund balances that you're keeping. So this is just a reaffirming. There have been no changes to this and there have been no required changes. So the board can choose to take it to second reading or reaffirm. With a reaffirmation, I don't believe you need to put it through second reading. If you're not making any changes, it's the same one that you'd normally have.
So Sue relayed to me a comment that she thought any decisions about investments should be with the approval of the board, and it
Okay.
didn't. And I'm not sure why that wasn't in the policy previously. So I guess maybe if we could put it to a second reading.
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, I think you could even just add it maybe in that first sentence. Working in conjunction with the superintendent and with approval of the joint board, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, it mentions finance committee, and we don't have a finance committee. Any other suggestions?
Yes, I don't know if
policy
that
DFA?
sentence should come out. Did we previously have a finance committee?
Not since I've been here.
All right, I think we should probably
Maybe
remove that sentence then. Any other suggestions? All right, is there a motion to approve policy or move policy DFA to a second reading?
So moved.
All right. Second, thank you. All right, and all those in favor? All right. Thank you, that passes unanimously. All right, so we have next up, so I realized I jumped over something on the committee listing. Requesting approval to apply, receive, and expend all federal funds. It says approved and very next to it, so I think my brain just jumped over it. Is that something we need to discuss further, Mr. Brown?
No, I believe you did that earlier in the year.
Perfect. All right. All right, so moving on, we have our approval of minutes for the February 14th meeting. Says public and non-public. I didn't get non-public
I was
minutes. Did
looking, I
anyone
was-
else?
No, I didn't.
No.
All right, so the non-public minutes were not included. So I'd like to take that part out and just focus on the public minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of February 14th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, thank you. That was a motion by Brian, second by Kathy Brosnan. Any discussion on the minutes?
This is a reminder, we also deferred the January one, but I guess we don't have those.
Yes, we don't have the January ones back yet. I'm gonna put that down for next month to make sure we do have those, the January 10th minutes. We asked our secretary to review those because there was a chunk of video and audio missing through the middle to see if perhaps any of that could be pulled back. And I believe Miss Levinson and was it you?
Yeah,
You
we're
the
gonna
other
sit
one?
down and
Who
we
were
did
gonna
not,
sit down.
that kind of got by us, so I'll
Yes.
schedule that with Miss Levinson.
Sit down and see if they could piece together some of what was missing while the video and audio were down, so. All right, so I'll make a note to include that in our next meeting. Anything else about the minutes that we need to address? All right, so we have a first and a second. All those in favor of approving our minutes? Opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Now we're up to committee reports. Did any of our committees meet since our last meeting?
Is the preschool committee part of the committees for that?
Yeah, that was Nottingham.
Yeah, that was a
specific, though,
Nottingham
not
specific,
joint.
okay.
Yeah.
Nothing, all right. Move on to our business administrators report, Mr. Byrne.
Yep, so if you look at page 13, what you'll see is your revenues coming in, and you'll see that there's an increase in revenue. Currently having that looked into, I do believe that is your health trust. That's why it's higher than what's anticipated, because your health trust is coming in as a revenue for, your premium holiday from the SAU, and you get that in there, and then we have to separate that out. So that should be your health trust, and I'm having that reviewed right now to make sure I can break that out exactly the way it needs to be, but that's why there's that additional revenue coming forward. It says miscellaneous income, and that's there is a potential that some of that may also be your all ed piece, because monies come in from tuition from districts that aren't a part of SAU 44, but it's not that much.
No.
So
Would be nice.
yeah, so I'm trying to break that out so I can give you a better number of that. There's been a couple of different things that have come up between when this was printed and developed to where we're at now, and I was hoping to have that. I just have not had a chance to meet with Ms. Osborne to really take a look at some of the breakdown of that. So then you turn to page, unless there's any questions on that, the next page would be page 14. That is your summary of your expenditure. So the summary of your expenditure, again, we have this issue where for some reason it's not masking the reports, and I got to go back in and fix iVision so it masks the reports. So your numbers are like your summary on your bottom of this is saying that you're anticipated to have $164,000 in surplus, but when we go through your expenditures, your monthly expenditures detailed, it's a way different number, but I'm going to break that out and explain a little bit more about that. I'm just not quite sure what's going on, and the reason I say that is because it didn't used to show it and now it is, so I have to make sure someone didn't turn off a setting. Because if you look at if you start on page 15 and you look at your at-risk and your OT, it's showing as all negative expenses. It's because those are not in our budget. Those are billed back to districts. So your at-risk is your coordinator that's split between the two districts, and your OT is your Nottingham OT that was paid through the SAU and billed back. So it's showing as a negative because it's not actually in the budget. And I'm going to break that up and I'll explain that a little bit more as we get a little further. If you follow down, you did put in your budget for compensated absences, so that's in there. That has not been calculated, and it's something we discussed earlier today at the separation meeting. So it's something we're gonna be looking at. Some of that number should have been drawn off already, so we'll find out where that's at and make sure that that gets drawn off correctly. Okay. The rest of the numbers on this page, on page 1 or on page 15, so one of the detailed, are pretty accurate in the aspect of what I had shared with the building before. We are over on our salary for a receptionist because we didn't budget for one, but we're using those funds from other places that we found savings. And the reason you're over on your your superintendent health insurance is because at the time you didn't budget for a superintendent health insurance, but you're saving that because that's my health insurance, but the director's health insurance is then not being used because that's Jill's health insurance. So it's going down the line. So it looking like negatives, but it's all bounces out, and I can explain that in more detail if there's any major questions about it. Because what you'll see is if you go down a little further, health insurance, so the line item is 10, 23, 20, 52, 110, 03, shows a positive of $26,000. So, you know, it's kind of like you're seeing a negative, but then a positive because they're attached to employees, those numbers. And change the plans to change. So if there's,
Is your retirement figure fixed or?
it
that still
is,
the-
it will be fixed. They fixed it at the state. I had to sign some paperwork, so you won't get another bill.
But
like-
this number is the old.
So what you're seeing is, no, that number, so if you're looking at the retirement, let me get down to superintendent, like,
It's all the way second from the bottom.
so what it was saying is budget balance of negative 7,000. That's because they've encumbered, but they're not actually gonna spend that encumbered. They corrected it, so they're not gonna spend that encumbered, because if you spend it, getting it back from New Hampshire retirement is not gonna be easy. You know, so what has happened is, my salary line, I was categorized under a teacher, which is 21.02. But as a superintendent, you're an employee, not a teacher, and that shifts to 14.06. So they continued to use my old rate, and that's what they started to encumber against, but there's a savings to be had there. So on page 2, you have a couple more of those areas where you're seeing not everything looks pretty good or pretty close to accurate when you're going across the board at the top, but when you get about halfway down, you're going to see your grant coordinator, your salary for your grant coordinator of about $37,000 remaining, and that's going to be accurate, because if you remember, we budgeted for a full-time position, and then we wound up keeping our part-time position in place. So we're not going to expend all that. So that is a big, that's a true savings. Then when you go down a little further, you'll also see your salary for your all ed facilitator. And then that individual's different benefits are in there, like a negative 20,000 for health insurance is tied to that. It's again, because the positions that are considered ghost positions, they're getting paid through the SAU and then billed back. This didn't usually come out in this report, but it came out and then it was sent to you. So I wanted to make sure that you had it, but I could review it with you on why. So it's nice to have it all, so it sees all the cash flow that's going through the SAU, but it does present some numbers that kind of throw it off. It looks like we're overexpending a lot of lines, but we're not. This budget is actually budgeted out of your IDA grants, and then that portion that you're seeing as the negative will be billed back to your tuition lines for the students who are participating in that. So if they're in the program, they're not going to Co-Brown or Dover, so we bill those lines. So that's how that balances out.
So will those, when they bill back, when they're billed out, will it clear off this line or no?
Yes.
Because it's somewhere else.
No, it will
It'll
clear,
off
yeah.
this line.
So I didn't see anything else in this one that wasn't directly tied to your facilitator. So there's another $10,000 one here that you see for retirement. These are the things that were billed through, and they're really not, they're not negatives. It's just that they're considered to be an extra position that's paid out of the SAU and then gets billed back. It gets billed back to the grant and it gets billed back to the tuition lines. It just hasn't taken place yet. If we move to page 3, unless there's any questions. So on page 3, you'll see your salary for your professional business manager still has $95,000 available in it, as does your health insurance for your business administrator, and then retirement. All those factors haven't been drawn off because we haven't had a business administrator. So you're not going to draw against that. If you look further down, you'll see a contracted interim business manager, and it shows that we're currently negative in that budget, and there's, about $80,000 over. And then you'll see that we've encumbered $43,000 of that already. So really it's really 43,000 that you're not gonna use all 79,000 of that. You're going to have about $43,000 in savings to $40,000 in savings on that, because we encumbered more than we needed when we thought we were going to have an individual here much more than we have. So there is going to be additional savings in there. So that brings us to page 18. Page 18 shows you a remaining balance in the SAU of approximately 68,000, but I'm going to go through what all the different lines that I've told you. And there's multiple savings because of all the bill backs that's showing negative. Those are counting against your position. But when you really go into account right now, you're tracking for over a $215,000 surplus right now. That's what you're looking at for a surplus in your SAU, over 215. I would say that's great, except for the only reason we're doing that is we're not staffed. So it's not that it's a good thing. We're not staffed. When we built our budget, we had an assistant director, and we're not utilizing that assistant director position. We had a BA in there, and we haven't had a BA. So those lines have, greatly saved funds, but sometimes to the detriment of being able to get everything done in a timely fashion as we're trying to improve. And I got to give credit to the business office for them getting things out the way they are and doing as best they can, especially Ms. Osborne. She has really stepped up and helped out in ways that I can't even imagine. I mean, she's doing much more than just the HR role. So I thank her all the time. She's been extremely helpful, and we sit down and we go over it tomorrow. I'll be sitting with her and going over some more numbers and trying to determine things, because she's really gotten to know iVision quite well in the backseat of it. When we had an individual with us for a finance manager for a short time, we were able to start getting back on track. And then that individual took a full-time position. Unfortunately, I was hoping we would have him here for 2 to 3 months. We had him for 2 to 3 weeks, but we got a lot done in those 2 to 3 weeks. And we're going to continue to move forward. And what will wind up happening is, instead of him going through and making approval changes, I will start going back into the system. And when they change to reallocate funds or to counteract, I will go in and review them and approve them, because she can't make the change and approve it. So she'll make the change and I'll go through and approve it as we sit down. So that's going to be one of our steps. But right now you are tracking for about a 215,000 plus surplus, which will come in handy, if we're able to find a BA for the remaining of this year. That would be nice, because we'll be able to fill that slot if we can, to really help us through the rest of this transition. And that's something I'm going to bring in non-public afterwards. I want to give the boards an update. So the next form that you have in front of you on page 20 is your preschool revenue. So your preschool revenue has not been completely updated yet. It's one of those items that was in process of being worked on by the finance manager when they came back. It's something we're going to be working on a little bit more in detail once we can get through. We have more money in our account. It's just transferring it from Cheddar up into our accounts. So when parents pay, some of our parents are paying digitally, and then we have to transfer it out of that into our account. And some are paying checks, and we just haven't had them deposited against this. So you do have a higher preschool tuition. And currently the way it's structured right now is it says tuition from parents. That's not separated out whether it's Northwood or Nottingham parents. It's just that's our tuition. We'll have to figure out where that comes from as we take a closer look at it. So that's your revenue source right now. So looking at that, you do have your preschool expenditure report here. And again, you'll see that you have a number of different savings in this line, some rather large numbers in savings and some negatives. The negatives are looking at your healthcare. You have some overdraws, but then in your other healthcare line, you have, it hasn't been drawn off at all. So it's aligning them in the position. I know this probably sounds a little familiar to what we were talking about in the past. It's just one of those things where we had to start working on the different districts, so we didn't try to retweak it. We know where it's at. It's just getting us there, and it's something that we'll be working towards. So if you look at your first healthcare, so Blue Cross teacher pre-K, it shows that we're overdrawn by 43,000. But then if you look below, 2 lines down, it says your health care for your health insurance, it has 66,000 in it. So it's just not it didn't get attached to the right people as it was inserted into the program. So that will be drawn down and fixed. What I will say is, again, you didn't have your child find coordinator truly balanced or filled. So you're going to see some savings across the board in that. So when we start to look, this one's obviously much shorter because there's less personnel. If you come down to page 2, what you'll see is page 2 of this report, so 22, you'll see your pre-K New Hampshire retirement system. So your occupational therapy services, and it's 32,000. That's going to be drawn down 0. That's going to be billed back to Northwood for the OT that's in there. So you have to take that 32,000 out of what's showing as your surplus. You're also going to be losing 15,000 from your rent. So when you look at removing the 32,000 and the 15,000, and you take that away from your 95,000, it's going to bring you down quite a bit lower into that $40,000 to $50,000 surplus range, which is pretty good because we haven't calculated all of our revenues in there yet. So when you add the more revenues, that will offset that a little bit. That's about where you had tracked before for those. So you are going to be seeing a decrease in that because you do still have to have the rent paid out and you still have to have OT paid out. So those 2 items together are 47,000, and then you had another 10,000 that needs to be drawn out. So when you remove that 57,000, you're left right in that $38,000 range, which is generally speaking where we finish the year out for the preschool. Sometimes it's been a little lower, but it's usually in that $20,000 to $30,000 range. I know especially for the new board members, I know I went through those pretty quick. If there's any questions, I would be happy to take any phone calls, emails. If you want to digest a little more with the new information and reach out, I can try to answer it the best I can and go from there, okay?
Finances, if it's not something you're familiar with, it's a bit of a challenge to get
It
your
goes
head around at the
quick.
beginning. Compensated absences.
Yeah, so there is a compensated absence in here. I'm trying to find it. I was going to get to it right here. So it got put in the back. So what you'll see is it should have been sent out separately. Did you?
Oh, it might be in my email. Yeah.
It was sent out separately as I can run up and make a photocopy if you need me to. So I decided, I thought it would be better than instead of just giving you the number of what you had gotten in the past, I wanted to break it out so that you understood that these numbers are actually, we're trying to use them. It's showing where they're at and what's available and what's been used. So sometimes in the past, you hadn't seen what was being used. You just saw what was owed. So the first part of this shares with you each individual, the rate of vacation days, so whether it be hourly or days, the beginning, what they started the year with, so how many they've earned and what they've used. So it shows you that they're working it down. So right now, what you'll see, for instance, is not everybody has taken it yet, but multiple people have put in for it. So that's going to lower the number. So right now, your number's a little high until people are able to put it in and take it. For instance, I'll use me as an example. I started the year with 40 because I didn't get to take any from last year. I got 15 days for this year, and I've taken 2.5. I'm only allowed to carry up to 50. So right now it says available to me is 52.5, but I would lose them if I don't take them. And I plan on taking a good chunk over April and the beginning of June. It's just every time that something comes up, we lose an individual here, and I'm covering those things, and it's been a little more challenging. So,
Can I ask, sorry,
yeah,
so there's a person that has 75 hours max, but they began with 127?
that is which one are you on? Sorry.
That's fine.
That is because at the beginning of the year, it was brought to you that we weren't able to have anyone take time off, and could they carry it over? And you had said they could carry it over to a certain amount, but at the end of the year, they weren't carrying that over anymore. They're gonna have 75. If they don't
At
use
the
it,
end of this year?
yeah, if they don't
Yes.
use it, they lose it. It was a carryover that they're allowed to bring with them, but they had a certain amount of time to get it in, and if they couldn't calculate to get it in, they were just going to wind up losing it.
Okay.
And just like with me too, if I can't get my days in, I'm gonna wind up losing them. So you did allow a carryover, and that's why. It was the one time I brought it to the board for.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I get it, and it did seem pretty high. So that's what it was. It was, they were covering multiple, because we lost so many people all at once. And then what that breaks out to be is, if you then go to the second page of this, it breaks out to show you what the rates are and what the total cost is if we stayed exactly status quo as we sit. Now, we know these numbers will be drawn down, and that's why when you look at the one where it was 127, when you look, it only says 75. Okay, because that's the most that they're going to be allowed to carry. If they don't use them, they're not going to be able to use them, and that's where everyone's at. So, for instance, I will give you the fact that right now, Mary Bulgers is still at 75, but she's on vacation next week. So this, we couldn't put in before she took it, but she's on vacation next week. I will be taking some vacation in April, so that will come down as well. So those are those numbers.
So just so I understand this correctly, the second page here, it has a total down the bottom right, 44,772. That's the cost of all of those maximum hours that are in the right-hand column on the first page.
That-
Those maximum hours are likely to drop at least a little bit.
Yes,
Okay.
they will drop.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Then the ones with no maximums, they just didn't have max. There's a couple that don't have any maxes on the top one.
On the first one,
Yeah. I was just wondering if they just don't have maximums in there.
um,
I
On
think
the
they
final
just didn't
column,
have,
they
they
don't.
all have maximums. I
Yeah.
think they just didn't have enough carried over.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
just
So
if they
that's
didn't
it.
need so
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Okay. I was just wondering if they were.
yeah. It's just, yeah, exactly. They're not going to max out because they don't have enough as it is. So
Yeah,
they're.
to begin.
Great. Any other questions on the business administrator's report? I want to thank you on behalf of the joint board, thank the business office for all of their extra work. And you had mentioned Linda Osborne. I know there's been an awful lot going on, so thank you to all of you for your extra work.
While we're talking about it, so I know, do you want compensated absences each month updated as we meet up? Because it wasn't one that we typically kept on there, but if we want to keep it up there, I just want to make sure. So it goes out with the regular packet.
I think for purposes of doing a separation agreement.
Now we have Ms. LaValle and the student services report.
Okay, you have my report in your packet, reporting on preschool enrollment, really not a lot of changes there. I do have about a total of, I think, 8 students in referral, so those will kind of come along as the process moves. So there will be some increases in numbers probably over the coming month, but right now things have been pretty stable. Any questions about preschool enrollment? And then the alt-ed enrollment, that also is pretty stable. We've had a couple of students added, one from Northwood, one from Nottingham as full-time students, and also one from Barrington. This time of year, we have that group of kids, some of which need to kind of catch up at hopefully at a faster pace when they can use a program like GradPoint and really come out and just focus on the the work for the credits that they need to finish the year on track is why we sometimes get a bump this time of year. But that works well for some of them. Any questions about alt ed?
Is there a cap for the number of students that has it ever really been discussed that?
I don't know if there's a cap. We haven't ever hit a place where we have to turn people away. my
So
understanding.
we can have 6 at any given time in a session. So because some students might only come in 1 day or 2 days if they're working full-time, like working a
Right.
part-time job. So the most we can house in a day is 12. So 6 in the morning, 6 in the afternoon, but it is a variety of schedule building depending on when they need it. Sometimes we'll only have 1 student, sometimes we'll have all 6. But that's what we've been able to fit. And 6 is only the number because that's how many laptops were able to be purchased at the time. We could probably go up a little higher, but that's how many machines we have for teachers, for students to be able to use. Okay.
Because students don't come in 5 days a week,
Right.
that's kind of like preschool, right?
Like that
It's more
preschool
spot, yeah,
schedule.
exactly.
Right. Okay. That makes
Occasionally a
sense.
student will come in 5 days a week, but not for a long time.
Mhm.
Like they'll do it for a week or 2, they'll get into the habit and then they are able to work independently and we follow up with them.
I was just curious if that was.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ms. LaValle.
Sure.
All right. Superintendent's report.
Okay, well, I wish I could say I actually need a personnel report. I'm kind of glad I don't need one because usually when I'm giving them to you, it's because someone's leaving. But I do have some personnel matters that I want to talk to you in non-public about that have recently come up, so we can discuss that. Correspondence, I don't have anything major for correspondence. I've been presenting most of that at local boards. If there's anything coming in, nothing has come to the joint board for a correspondence. Your update for the Stratford separation agreement, I believe we should discuss a non-public. We did have a good meeting today, but that will be a non-public thing because it does have some legal matters in it with the lawyers there, but we are moving in the right direction. As far as the audit, I believe yesterday or the day before we submitted the final thing to them to write off of their tick list that they're like, you need to check this one off and then we can finalize everything. Some of that, as I've shared at the Nottingham board, are really small items such as someone's time card that we need to find from February of last year. We have to go dig it up and we got to go find it. So it's little things like that. Or we had a grant purchase and now we need to find the receipt. Like we need to prove that we actually paid it, bought it and paid for it. So digging through and trying to find those. So those are some of the little items that we were missing. One of the other items is really explaining the at-risk and the bill backs. As you see, it's confusing when I'm saying it to you, and we've discussed it for many years in a row. When you get auditors coming in, they want to just verify, well, why is this at a higher rate? Why now are you making more money than you budgeted? And explaining to them that with a district separating, still using the services, they're paying a fee. Another district actually found themselves needing it more often than typical. And they had a couple other students attend. So there was some revenue to be had from that, even last year when they're reviewing the numbers. So that's kind of where it's at. So that's where we're at on that one. When it comes to, again, we'll have the legal update that I'll share with you in non-public. And then we have the SAU inventory. This is something I wanted to make sure that you saw multiple times and something that we're going to want to sit down, as you had said, that committee. So what I want to share with you, page 24. So page 24 is an important one. This is something that we're also working with Stratford on. There's no definite yes on this, but I at least wanted the board to understand. The first time that the joint board saw the numbers of our inventory, it was based on all brand new prices. Well, there aren't very many all brand new things in the SAU. One of the few things that we have that's like relatively brand new would be this table, but most of the other stuff is used. It's multiple years old. This table is actually multiple years old, but since we don't use it on a regular basis every day, it's like new. So what we did was I tasked Miss Bulger to try to help me find. She was like, oh, I think I can do that. So she started to find what some of the prices for the furniture was used. And we started to look at used prices, and that brought us from $47,400 $48.68 of new cost items down to $27,494 of what's actually our materials, what it would actually be if you're looking at what we have here. So that's a combination of the fixed assets of our offices, filing cabinets, desks. It doesn't go into account for all of our little things like bins and stuff of that nature, but it is our larger items. If there's no questions on that, I can go on to page 25, which is our computer inventory, which is a slightly different number than what was in this report anyway, because if you're looking at computer hardware from this report, this was a year ago. So our computer hardware now is going to have less value because again, it's depreciating with computers. So you'll see a list of all of the different items that we have and some of the notes that are in there. And one of the things I want to go over, and I think this is going to be an item that the boards are going to need to really sit down and we'll have to talk about, is there are certain things that make sense for the SAU, this SAU office to keep because they're already installed and housed, like switches and wiring. Those things make sense to be here. The same thing with, we have 5 servers, so 2 servers stay or 3 servers could stay because they're set up for this SAU, and then 2 servers could be washed and sent out. So in order to do that, the boards are going to have to decide how they would like to take into account the other software or hardware, meaning, and I think a good person to have involved in this would be to have Mr. Stanley join us and really sit down and talk to us in more detail when we start looking at this. But we have, say, 13 desktops. Now, some of them are really old and probably don't have much value, and some of them are newer. And what we would do is say, okay, we're going to have to separate these, and then eventually each district's going to get half of what we have in some value, and then be responsible to replenish what they had to give up, if that makes sense. Yeah. Mr. Stanley did put forward a list in red ink when it was sent to you, so you should have seen the red. Mr. Stanley felt like the red ink is what should stay in the SAU, and if that outweighs if there's more value there than what's going to Nottingham. Now, obviously, Nottingham doesn't need all 13 of the old desktops either, so there might be some money exchange because there might be more assets here than what's needed, or there might going through might be able to break free. So that's currently where we're at. I found it really funny. Out of all the stuff that I went through it with him, and out of all the things that I just couldn't wrap my head around was a $200 typewriter. And he's like, no, that's what it costs. If you get a new one, it doesn't matter. You get a used one, it doesn't matter. I was like, okay, I'm like, that costs more than some of our desktops.
Probably an antique by now.
It is.
It's probably worth a lot of money.
But when he gave me a number, I'm like, wait, we got a desktop that's worth $100, and we got an old typewriter that's worth $250. He goes, no, that's what it is. So it's like, okay. So we went through this and we talked about it. For instance, I did have to go and look up some of the items, like our iPads that are really old. They can't be updated anymore. They're really, we don't want to say there's no value, but they're old now. They're very old. They're second generation. So you're not going to get new devices on. They could be used for something, but what? Not 100% sure, but that's one of the items that we have to look at. The other part that I put in there on the next page, you'll see that on the next page, these were all grant funded out of IDA, and we used the remote learning grant for these. So Northwood bought 2 with their remote learning grant for the SAU. Nottingham bought 1. Nottingham also bought 5 for their staff, though, in the building. If you remember me working to make sure that all your case managers got new computers. Yeah. So that is there. That's why it's separate. It's not a part of that inventory, but because these are already accounted for. The same thing under the grants. So while there are phones, so you have a photocopier in here. Mm-hmm. That photocopier is a lease. There's no value to it. The phones are free with the contract. So we have phones, but there's no value. But I wanted to make sure you knew we were accounting for them. But it's not like we paid $1. It's not like we can, that's what they ship them to us for. It's not like we can then say there's money tied to it. So that's what we had talked about. And then the preschool hardware is not included in this list, but it's something we can look at in more details and move forward, because with the preschool, hardware, computer hardware, that can easily be split, like right in half. There should be no need for any of that, but some of that stuff is getting pretty old. The same thing with the preschool furniture, that will be split right in half. There's really no issue. I think the biggest issue that we're gonna see in the preschool is we're gonna need a caravans of vehicles or a U-Haul to do it. One of the things I suggested in this whole process would be to rent a U-Haul for a week, go up there, load it up there, and then come here and load it up and then take it, because you have too much stuff to do in trucks. And if you rent a U-Haul for a little bit of a time, a pod, whatever you choose to do, you'd be able to fill it up over the course of a few days where the custodians come and work on it versus trying to cram it all in a day. It's either that or you could look at a moving agency, but with the price of gas and everything else right now and the shortage of labor, I think it would cost you more than just looking at overtime for your hourly staff to come and have them do some of the moving. I think that would be the way we would have to look at it, but that's something definitely to look at.
Could be a joint board end of year party.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I said,
Community
pizza party.
service day.
I know. Those Co-Brown students that need a little.
That was-
extra
that
community
was a
service.
good thing, though.
For sure. I'll have to do it in July, though.
That is a good idea. Could be community service. I like that.
I have a high school student.
That is a great idea, actually. Yeah. That brings us to the next area that's in there, and that's the Tyler, unless there's questions about the SAU, I'd be happy to answer it. I think it's something that we can all sit down and go about. And what I like about this is something that Ms. Martin had said, which is if we start looking at it now and not wait, and we can devise a plan and sit down and talk about it, we can do a walkthrough on one of the days after the rest of the staff is out, so we're not interrupting them and saying, okay, yeah, we could see this desk in our office, we could see this, and we can go back and forth and really see how it works out. And I think we'll get further along. If you would like to have Mr. Smith come one time to work with Aaron too on the technology components, like I said, he's going to be Mr. Stanley will be your go-to on what he thinks is best for the current SAU, but then you'll also want to look at Mr. Smith, and he might say, we don't need any of these old machines, but unfortunately, that's like there are extras, and that's kind of what had happened. We did try at the end of last year to get rid of some of the stuff that wasn't needed, if you remember, and we might wind up in that same part where nobody needs it, so we're just going to donate it, and we'll have to start over. So that's something we might have to look at. So your Tyler invoice, you'll see that your invoice here is $21,788.93. That's a corrected invoice because what they billed us was $29,184.23. And Mr. Stanley really worked hard to find out from them, why did you bill us something that was way outside of what we discussed? And they were able to go back and forth and figure out that there was an error. The disadvantage of finding that error at this point was that Tyler wasn't willing to reimburse that money. Instead, they were willing to give a credit. So for next year. So there's two ways to look at this. Is Northwood is staying with iVision and Nottingham is now voted to stay with iVision. We could ask them to put that credit in the percentage of each district. So where you had 54%, I want to say, you would get 54% of that credit applied to your bill to help start off your first bill. And then Northwood would get the remainder balance credited to their account. And I don't see why they wouldn't be able to make that happen. And I think that's the cleanest way to do it. When you weren't going to be using iVision, that would have been a little more troublesome because then we would have had to credit it and completely reimbursed. But I think we should be able to work on that. And what I will do is have Mr. Stanley work with them to apply that credit equally to both, or proportionately to both districts, now that you've started to move forward with that. And I think that will help the first year startup with Nottingham anyway. And it could be an item where Nottingham might ask for the whole credit and then compensate it in a different way. And I'll leave that up to the boards to figure that one out if that's what you want to do, just for that startup
I
cost.
think if they'll split it, that would be fine.
Okay,
Just cleaner.
yeah.
It's easier, makes
Yeah.
it less confusing down the road.
Yeah, for the proportionate split. So I was kind of happy to hear you're going with Tyler because I felt like that might be an easier solution.
Absolutely.
Everything in my report.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Byrne on the superintendent's report? we'll move on to other items. Does anyone have any additional items to add to our agenda this evening? Okay, we'll move on to the second page here, the SAU Structuring Committee / SAU Transition Committee updates. Do either town have anything to share with the larger group?
I guess we could share, we haven't made a announcement yet, but we have a superintendent candidate that we're working on onboarding. We have been talking a lot about, obviously, the software. The board decided to go with Infinite Visions. We're still looking at the HR module and also possibly Ready Sub to replace what we have been using for Sub. And we're still looking at Frontline. So we have another meeting scheduled the first Monday in April. I think it's the 4th. And so really like kind of getting to the nuts and bolts.
For sure.
This
Mhm.
inventory will be very helpful because we're actually going to get to the point where we need a like kind of schedule of all the things we got to get done.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on your superintendent.
Yes.
search. Hope that wraps up quickly.
The BA search has not been as successful so far. So that's our biggest, I think, concern is getting
Mhm.
that position. I guess Sue is planning to meet with Millance and Heath to potentially have them kind of do a financial account cleanup for us. And so it's something that I don't know if they'd be willing to do a broader one to get the whole SAU accounts cleaned up, but might be worth asking when they're here. So they're going to price out for us, like what would it cost to have somebody come in and just so that we're not transferring over bad data
Yep.
and kind of make a plan for making a clean cut.
Yeah, we're supposed to meet with Melanson to do that. They were gonna look at just the Nottingham portion originally, and we discussed that too, to where it could be Nottingham and the Northwood and SAU. They would give recommendations, and that's a cost for them to come in and explore everything. And then from there, we could decide whether or not we are going to hire them as an interim to come in and make those changes, or if we get lucky enough to find a BA who's able to make some of those adjustments.
I think it would make the audits of the current year go faster if we get that stuff cleaned up.
I agree.
Yeah.
It'll make the transition go much smoother too.
We
Yes.
Have the money in the budget because we haven't had a BA.
Right.
I think that does make sense, yeah.
I think that's it for us.
From the Northwood side, there's not really an update other than our budget was passed. So, the budget that we had shared for the SAU structure along with our full Northwood structure will be, putting in place, trying to fill positions that aren't filled yet. Pretty much the committee's wrapped up a while ago with the proposal of the budget. So.
Great. All right. Future meeting agenda items. I jotted down that we need the January 10th minutes. So Ms. Levinson and Mr. Byrne are going to work on comparing notes and filling that out. Moving forward, we're going to want the compensated absences each month. So we're going to want to continue. Do we want to continue to have the SAU? We don't SAU inventory in our packets each month just to help us guide discussions. Nothing really needs to change about them.
Yeah, I don't think so. Maybe when we have a draft agreement, we can just append it
Perfect.
or
Perfect.
redistribute it at that point so people can see it.
All right. Anything else that needs to get added on for future agenda items? Quiet, easy today. All right. So our next meeting date is April 11th at 6:30. Is this meeting late or did the April meeting get bumped up? I feel like there's some.
This meeting got-
That's right. We got
postponed.
bumped. That's
This is
right.
right.
Okay.
Voting to-
All right, that's right. So we'll be at 6:30 on April 11th in the SAU conference room here. All right, so now we're going to move into non-public.
B, C, and L.
B, C, and L.
Nope, you're all set.
I have those in my packet.